The wind didn't just blow in the Nevada desert. It mourned. It carried the scent of dry sage and ancient dust, whistling through the ribs of sun-bleached cattle that had long since given up the ghost. Elias Vance adjusted the brim of his weathered Stetson. His eyes narrowed against the biting grit. He was a man built of hard angles and scars, a former frontier scout who had seen enough blood to turn a river red. He wasn't looking for trouble, but in his experience, trouble usually had a way of finding him first. Before him lay Blackwood. Once a booming silver town, it now sat huddled in a valley like a skeleton picked clean by vultures, according to the maps. Blackwood had been abandoned in 1878 after a cave-in at the Great Sierra Mine, but the letter tucked into Elias's vest pocket said otherwise. It was dated 1888, just 2 weeks ago. Elias, the elegant script read, "The fog is coming back. They are walking the streets again. If you ever cared for the promise you made my father, come to the church in Blackwood. Don't let the silver light catch you." It was signed by Sarah, the daughter of the man who had saved Elias's life during the Civil War. Elias didn't believe in ghosts, and he certainly didn't believe in cursed silver, but he believed in debts. And this was a debt that had come due. As he led his horse, a sturdy bay named Cinder, past the rotted town gate, the temperature plummeted. One moment he was in the sweltering heat of the high desert. The next, a bone-chilling mist rolled down from the mountains, swallowing the sun. The fog was thick, tasting of metallic salt and cold earth. Elias pulled his duster tight. The silence was absolute. No birds, no crickets, not even the rustle of a lizard. He walked down the main thoroughfare, his boots thudding hollowly on the boardwalk. He passed the general store. Through the grime-streaked window, he saw a sight that made his skin crawl. A sack of flour sat open on the counter, a scoop still resting in it. A half-written ledger lay nearby. The ink faded, but the pen still resting on the page. It looked as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of a heartbeat. He approached the Silver Spade Saloon. The swinging doors creaked on rusted hinges. Inside, the smell of stale whiskey and rot was overpowering. He stepped in, his hand instinctively hovering near the grip of his peacemaker. "Anyone here?" His voice rasped. It sounded too loud, too intrusive in the stagnant air. There was no answer, but his eyes caught a table in the corner. 3 glasses sat there, half filled with amber liquid. A hand of poker was dealt out, 3 aces and 2 eights. The dead man's hand. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the floor above. Thump, thump, thump. It was the slow, rhythmic sound of someone dragging something heavy. Elias didn't hesitate. He drew his revolver. The click of the hammer cocking sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. He climbed the stairs, the wood groaning under his weight. He reached the hallway where the wallpaper was peeling away like dead skin. The sound was coming from room 4. He kicked the door open, his weapon leveled. The room was empty. A rocking chair sat by the window, swaying gently as if someone had just stood up. On the floor sat a small wooden doll with button eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling. Elias wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. He walked to the window and looked out. The fog had thickened, turning the town into a gray labyrinth. Through the mist, he saw a flickering light. It was coming from the steeple of the church at the end of the road, a pale, flickering yellow glow. "Sarah," he whispered. He hurried back down, mounting Cinder and urging him toward the church. The horse was skittish, tossing its head and snorting in fear. As they moved deeper into the town, Elias noticed something odd. The shadows on the ground weren't moving with the light. They seemed to linger, stretching toward him even when he moved away from the dim sun. He reached the heavy oak doors of the St. Jude's Church. The wood was scarred with deep gouges, as if something with claws had tried to scratch its way inside. He dismounted, tied Cinder to a hitching post, and pushed the doors open. The interior was cold enough to see his breath. Pews were overturned, and the altar was covered in a thick layer of dust. "Sarah," he called out, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Close the door?" A sharp voice hissed from the darkness. "Close it and bolt it now." A woman emerged from the shadows behind the pulpit. She was pale, her hair a tangled mess of auburn, her eyes wide with a terror that looked years old. She held a silver crucifix in one hand and a rusted shotgun in the other. Elias slammed the door shut and threw the iron bolt. "Sarah, it's Elias Vance. I got your letter." She stared at him for a long moment, the shotgun trembling in her hands, before she finally lowered it. "Elias, you actually came. I thought the fog would get you before you reached the gate." "I'm here," he said, stepping toward her. "But Sarah, what is this?" "The letter said 10 years, but you look like you haven't aged a day since I saw you in Abilene." Sarah let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "That's the secret of Blackwood, Elias. Time doesn't pass here. Not for us. The silver mine, they dug too deep. They found something that wasn't silver, something that eats time." Before Elias could ask what she meant, a low, guttural moan rose from outside the church. It wasn't the sound of a human. It sounded like the earth itself was groaning. Then came the scratching. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Hundreds of tiny claws against the stone walls. "The faceless," Sarah whispered, her face turning white. "They know you're here. They can smell the new time on you." Elias looked at the stained glass windows. Figures were passing by, tall, elongated silhouettes with no heads, their limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm. They carried lanterns that bled a sickly silver light. "What do they want?" Elias asked, checking the cylinders of his pistol. "They want to bring you into the fold," Sarah said, grabbing his arm. Her grip was cold, unrealistically cold. "If they catch you, you become like them. A memory trapped in the silver. We have to get to the cellar. It's the only place they can't reach." As they hurried toward the back of the church, a sudden booming voice echoed through the rafters. It wasn't a voice from the throat. It was a vibration that shook Elias's very teeth. "Elias, Vance!" Elias froze. The voice sounded exactly like his younger brother, Caleb, a boy who had died in his arms at the Battle of Gettysburg. "Elias, why did you leave me in the trenches?" "Don't listen!" Sarah screamed, pulling him toward a trapdoor. "It's not him. It's the town. It uses your guilt to pull you into the fog." Elias shook his head, clearing the fog in his mind. He looked back at the church doors. The wood was beginning to splinter. A pale silver light was seeping through the cracks. "Get down!" Elias yelled, shoving Sarah into the cellar and jumping in after her. He slammed the trapdoor shut just as the church doors burst open with the force of a hurricane. Above them, he heard the sound of heavy, dragging footsteps and that same chilling, vibrating voice calling his name over and over. In the dark of the cellar, lit only by a single guttering candle, Elias looked at Sarah. She was shivering, her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. "Sarah," Elias said, his voice low and dangerous, "tell me the truth. How many people are left in this town?" Sarah looked up at him, tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. "There is no one left, Elias, only me." "And now, you." Outside, the wind howled louder, and the scratching on the trapdoor began. Elias Vance, the man who didn't believe in ghosts, sat in the dark with a woman who shouldn't be alive, listening to the voice of his dead brother screaming for his soul. He realized then that the letter wasn't an invitation. It was a trap, and the Blackwood curse had just claimed its newest guardian. The cellar was a tomb of damp earth and rotting wood. Above them, the heavy, rhythmic thudding of footsteps continued. As if something with limbs of lead was pacing the floorboards of the church, Elias Vance sat with his back against a support beam, his peacemaker resting on his knee. He watched Sarah. In the flickering light of the single candle, her shadow danced against the wall, long, jagged, and somehow heavier than a normal shadow should be. "How long have you been down here, Sarah?" Elias asked, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "I told you," she replied, her eyes fixed on the trapdoor above. "Time doesn't move. I've seen the moon rise and fall 1,000 times, but the sun, the real sun, it hasn't touched these streets since the day of the collapse." Elias didn't want to believe her, but the cold in his bones was different from any winter he'd survived in the Rockies. This was a deep, stagnant cold, the kind that belonged to the bottom of a grave you said the mine was the source, Elias prompted. "What did they find down there?" Sarah finally looked at him. "My father was the foreman. They were chasing a vein of silver that defied logic. It glowed, Elias. Not like metal, but like captured starlight. They called it the weeping silver. But the deeper they dug, the more the men changed. They stopped eating. They stopped sleeping. They just whispered to the walls." The thudding above stopped, more terrifying than the noise. Then a soft, "We can't stay here. If this town is a trap, we need to find the trigger. So that's where we're going." Are the faceless. They live in the dark. I'd rather die fighting in the dirt than rot in a cellar. Small leather pouch of gunpowder and a length of fuse. This town is no different. It's just ground and shadow. The church was empty, but the air was thick with a shimmering. But when it touched Elias's hand, and they slipped out of the side door into the valley like a thick, his senses dialed to a razor's edge. Every rustle of dead weeds felt like a threat. Where the blackened timber frame of the Great Sierra, as they climbed the rocky path toward the entrance, with strange crystals, shards. They pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. "Elias, look," Sarah whispered, from the houses and the saloons. They glided, their long, duster-clad forms blending into the mist, blank surfaces where features should be. They were carrying lanterns, but the light didn't push back the dark. "Oh, they're tracking us." They scrambled into the mouth, reached the base of the ridge. Elias lit a lantern, the flame struggling. Tunnel walls were veins of that. As they moved deeper, Elias saw tools dropped in mid-swing, but the metal head glowing with a fierce intensity. Something is wrong. He knelt and touched the floor. Not the vibration of machinery, like a giant cat purring in its sleep. It knows we're here. It's hungry. Total darkness swallowed them. Silence reclaimed the church. Metallic scraping sound began right on the trap door. Clink, 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 Elias said, standing up. "The mine is where this started." "It's suicide," Sarah gasped. "The mine is their cathedral," Elias retorted. He reached into his duster and pulled out "I've spent half my life scouting terrain that wanted me dead." He carefully cracked open the trap door. Silver haze. It looked like floating dust. It stung like acid. He pulled Sarah up. Graveyard. The fog had settled. Gray Lake. Elias led the way. Every creak of a swinging sign. They moved toward the northern ridge. Mine loomed like the ribcage of a dead giant. Elias noticed the ground was littered of that weeping silver, synchronized with the beating of his own heart. Pointing toward the town below, the fog was shifting. Figures were emerging. They didn't walk. They had no faces, just smooth, reflecting the silver haze like dull mirrors. It consumed it. The faceless, Elias muttered, of the mine, just as the first of the spectral figures. The air inside the tunnel was heavy with the smell of ozone and wet stone. Against the oppressive atmosphere, the glowing silver pulsing faster now. A pickaxe was embedded in the wall. The handle rotted away. Elias said, stopping dead. The ground was vibrating, but a low, guttural hum. "It's the heart of the mine," Sarah whispered. Elias bowed. Suddenly, the lantern in Elias's hand flickered and died. Total darkness swallowed them. "Sarah?" Elias reached out, but his hand met only cold air. "Sarah!" "I'm here, Elias." Her voice came from behind him, but it sounded different. It was melodic, hollow, echoing as if she were standing at the bottom of a deep well. Elias struck a match. The small flame illuminated the tunnel for a few feet. Sarah was standing 10 feet away, her back to him. She was staring at a massive wall of pure crystalline silver. "Look at the reflections, Elias," she said softly. "They show the truth." Elias looked. In the polished surface of the silver wall, he didn't see himself. He saw a younger version of himself, standing in a field of tall grass, holding his brother Caleb's hand. The reflection was vibrant, full of color and life, everything the ghost town was not. But then the reflection shifted. The grass withered. Caleb's face began to melt into silver liquid. The Elias in the mirror turned toward him, his eyes replaced by glowing silver sparks. "It's a lie," Elias barked, dropping the match. He fumbled for his lantern, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. It wasn't the soft hand of a woman. It felt like cold, polished stone. "Is it?" The voice of Sarah, or the thing mimicking her, whispered in his ear. "Don't you want to stay in the light? Don't you want to see Caleb again?" Elias swung his heavy revolver in a wide arc, striking the figure. There was a sound of shattering glass. He scrambled back, striking another match. The thing standing before him wasn't Sarah. It was a faceless, wearing Sarah's dress. Its smooth, mirror-like head reflected the match flame in 1,000 distorted points of light. Behind it, dozens more were crawling out of the crevices in the walls. their movements spider-like and silent. "Where is she?" Elias roared, firing his pistol. The bullet struck the faceless in the chest, but instead of blood, a spray of silver liquid erupted. It didn't fall. It hissed and dissolved into the air. The creature didn't flinch. It took a step forward, its elongated fingers reaching for his throat. Elias realized the bullets wouldn't kill them. He dropped his gun and grabbed the leather pouch of gunpowder. He shoved the fuse in and lit it with his dying match. "You want time?" Elias hissed at the monsters. "Have a second of mine!" He hurled the improvised bomb at the support beams holding up the crystalline wall. The explosion was deafening. In the confined space, rocks cascaded down, and the glowing silver wall shattered into a million pieces. The shockwave threw Elias backward, his head slamming against the hard tunnel floor. As his vision faded into blackness, he saw Sarah, the real Sarah. She was being dragged deeper into the mine by a figure in a black duster, a figure that looked exactly like Elias himself. The last thing he heard before the darkness claimed him was a soft, silvery whisper. "The Guardian has arrived." The cycle begins again. Total darkness swallowed them. "Sarah?" Elias reached out, but his hand met only cold air. "Sarah!" "I'm here, Elias." Her voice came from behind him, but it sounded different. It was melodic, hollow, echoing as if she were standing at the bottom of a deep well. Elias struck a match. The small flame illuminated the tunnel for a few feet. Sarah was standing 10 feet away, her back to him. She was staring at a massive wall of pure crystalline silver. "Look at the reflections, Elias," she said softly. "They show the truth." Elias looked. In the polished surface of the silver wall, he didn't see himself. He saw a younger version of himself, standing in a field of tall grass, holding his brother Caleb's hand. The reflection was vibrant, full of color and life, everything the ghost town was not. But then the reflection shifted. The grass withered. Caleb's face began to melt into silver liquid. The Elias in the mirror turned toward him, his eyes replaced by glowing silver sparks. "It's a lie," Elias barked, dropping the match. He fumbled for his lantern, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. It wasn't the soft hand of a woman. It felt like cold, polished stone. "Is it?" The voice of Sarah, or the thing mimicking her, whispered in his ear. "Don't you want to stay in the light? Don't you want to see Caleb again?" Elias swung his heavy revolver in a wide arc, striking the figure. There was a sound of shattering glass. He scrambled back, striking another match. The thing standing before him wasn't Sarah. It was a faceless, wearing Sarah's dress. Its smooth, mirror-like head reflected the match flame in 1,000 distorted points of light. Behind it, dozens more were crawling out of the crevices in the walls, their movements spider-like and silent. "Where is she?" Elias roared, firing his pistol. The bullet struck the faceless in the chest, but instead of blood, a spray of silver liquid erupted. It didn't fall. It hissed and dissolved into the air. The creature didn't flinch. It took a step forward, its elongated fingers reaching for his throat. Elias realized the bullets wouldn't kill them. He dropped his gun and grabbed the leather pouch of gunpowder. He shoved the fuse in and lit it with his dying match. "You want time?" Elias hissed at the monsters. "Have a second of mine!" He hurled the improvised bomb at the support beams holding up the crystalline wall. The explosion was deafening. In the confined space, rocks cascaded down, and the glowing silver wall shattered into a million pieces. The shockwave threw Elias backward, his head slamming against the hard tunnel floor. As his vision faded into blackness, he saw Sarah, the real Sarah. She was being dragged deeper into the mine by a figure in a black duster, a figure that looked exactly like Elias himself. The last thing he heard before the darkness claimed him was a soft, silvery whisper. "The Guardian has arrived." The cycle begins again. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Rocks cascaded down, and the glowing silver wall shattered into a million pieces. The shockwave threw Elias backward, his head slamming against the hard tunnel floor. As his vision faded into blackness, he saw Sarah, The real Sarah, she was being dragged deeper into the mine by a figure in a black duster, a figure that looked exactly like Elias himself. The last thing he heard before the darkness claimed him was a soft, silvery whisper. "The Guardian has arrived." The cycle begins again. Elias Vance woke to the taste of copper and the smell of ozone. His head throbbed with a rhythmic, pounding ache that matched the pulsing silver veins in the mine walls. For a moment he forgot where he was, the darkness of the tunnel pressing in on him like the weight of 1,000 years. Then, the memory of the explosion and the sight of Sarah being dragged into the abyss hit him like a physical blow. He groaned, pushing himself up from the rubble. His duster was shredded and his knuckles were raw, but his peacemaker was still tucked in its holster. He struck a match, his hands trembling. The small flame revealed a transformed world. The explosion hadn't just cleared a path. It had cracked open a pocket of the earth that had been sealed since the dawn of time. The silver here wasn't the pale moonlight color of the upper levels. It was turning a deep, bruised crimson. Elias checked his pocket watch. The glass was cracked, and the hands were spinning wildly backward. "Time is dying," he muttered to himself. He moved deeper, his boots crunching on shards of weeping silver that hissed under his weight. The air grew warmer, vibrating with a low, chanting sound. It wasn't human voices. It was the sound of the crystals themselves, vibrating at a frequency that made his nose bleed. He emerged into a massive central chamber. In the center sat a lake of liquid silver, its surface as smooth as a mirror. But it wasn't reflecting the ceiling. It was reflecting a sky dominated by a massive bleeding blood moon. Sarah was there. She was tied to a jagged pillar of crystal in the center of the lake, her head lolling to the side. Standing over her was the figure Elias had seen before, the one who wore his own face, his own clothes, and even the same scar across the bridge of his nose. But this shadow Elias had eyes that were nothing more than pits of swirling red mercury. "You're late, Elias," the shadow said. Its voice didn't come from its mouth. It echoed from the walls of the cavern. "The moon is reaching its zenith. The ritual of the blood silver cannot be stopped." "Let her go," Elias rasped, his hand moving to his holster. The shadow laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "You still don't understand. I am what you become when you stop fighting the dark. I am the part of you that stayed in the trenches with Caleb. I am the guilt you've been running from for 10 years. Around the lake, dozens of faceless emerged from the shadows. But they weren't the gray, misty forms from the town. They were armored in crimson crystal, their elongated fingers sharpened into blades. They began to circle the lake, their movements synchronized with the pulsing of the blood moon reflected in the silver liquid. "This town needs a guardian," the shadow continued. Stepping closer to Sarah, he held a shard of red crystal over her heart. Sarah kept the fog at bay for a decade, but her time is spent. Her soul is thin. She needs a replacement. She chose you, Elias. She brought you here to die so she could finally walk into the sun. Elias looked at Sarah. She opened her eyes, her gaze meeting his. "Elias, I didn't mean it was the only way," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. Elias felt a surge of cold fury. He didn't care if she had betrayed him. He didn't care if the town was a living nightmare. He was a man who lived by a code, and that code didn't allow for women to be sacrificed to ancient mountain gods. "If this town wants a soul," Elias growled, drawing his revolver, "it's going to have to take mine the hard way." He didn't fire at the shadow. Instead, he fired at the ceiling. During his years as a scout, Elias had learned how to read the bones of a mountain. He had seen the fault lines in the cavern roof when he first entered. The explosion earlier had weakened the entire structure. The heavy .45 caliber rounds struck a cluster of overhanging stalactites, sending down a shower of stone and red dust. The faceless shrieked, a high-pitched, metallic sound that shattered the silver silence. Elias charged. He didn't run around the lake. He ran across it. The liquid silver was viscous, like thick oil, and it burned his boots, but he didn't stop. The armored faceless lunged at him, their crystal blades whistling through the air. Elias ducked and wove, firing from the hip. Each shot that hit a faceless caused a miniature explosion of red sparks, but for every one he dropped, two more took its place. The shadow Elias moved with supernatural speed, appearing in front of him. "You cannot kill what is already dead, brother." The shadow swung a heavy fist, hitting Elias with the force of a runaway train. Elias flew backward, skimming across the surface of the silver lake until he slammed into the base of the pillar where Sarah was tied. His vision swam. The blood moon in the reflection was turning darker, a deep obsidian red. He could feel the mind beginning to drain him, pulling the memories of his life out through his skin. He saw his mother's face, the smell of rain on a dusty trail, the taste of a cold beer, all of it being sucked into the silver lake. "Give up," the shadow whispered. Standing over him, the red crystal shard glowing with lethal intensity. "Become the guardian. Protect the secret. Save her by taking her place." Elias looked up. He saw the red crystal descending, but he also saw the dynamite he had tucked into his belt earlier. He didn't reach for his gun. He reached for his lighter. "I told you," Elias spat, a mouthful of blood hitting the silver floor. "I'm a scout, and a scout always leaves a trail for others to follow." He lit the fuse and shoved the dynamite directly into the base of the crystal pillar. "Elias, no!" Sarah screamed. The shadow's eyes widened in genuine shock. He hadn't expected Elias to choose destruction over survival. The explosion was far more powerful than the previous one, because the pillar was made of weeping silver. The dynamite didn't just break the stone, it caused a chain reaction. The red energy stored in the crystal was released all at once. A shockwave of pure, white-hot light erupted from the center of the lake. The armored faceless were vaporized instantly, turned into nothing more than silver ash. The shadow Elias let out a final, agonizing roar before he was consumed by the light, his form dissolving back into the darkness of Elias's mind. The ceiling of the cavern began to collapse in earnest. Massive boulders fell into the silver lake, causing waves of liquid metal to splash against the walls. Elias fumbled with Sarah's bindings, his hands burned and bleeding. We have to move," he gasped. He cut her loose just as the pillar crumbled. He grabbed her around the waist and leaped toward the tunnel entrance as the entire central chamber began to cave in. They tumbled into the darkness of the side tunnel just as a massive slab of granite sealed the chamber behind them. The roar of the collapse was deafening, a sound like the world being torn apart. Then silence. Elias lay on his back, gasping for air that was thick with dust and the smell of spent gunpowder. Beside him, Sarah was shaking, her breath coming in ragged gulps. The silver light was gone. The only light was the faint, dying glow of a few shards of crystal embedded in the walls. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Elias sat up, his body feeling like it had been put through a meat grinder. He looked at his hands. They were stained with red silver, a mark that he knew would never wash off. "No," Elias said, looking down the dark tunnel. "We broke the ritual, but we didn't break the curse. The town is still there. The fog is still waiting. And now we've just made it angry." Above them, through the cracks in the stone, they could hear a new sound. It wasn't the thudding of footsteps or the scratching of claws. It was the sound of 1,000 voices, all whispering his name in unison. The blood moon had reached its peak, and the same night was about to get a whole lot longer. The next episode is currently in the works and will be available very soon. To stay updated and see the continuation of this journey, make sure to subscribe, like, and follow our page. Trust me, the next twist is a game changer. See you in the next one.